Welcome. I'm Kevin Miller. I have conversations with people that help us make better meaning in our lives. In this episode, deconstructing and navigating the hero's journey. Now, my focus here is not being a hero in the fashion our culture uses the word in regard to caretaking humanity and saving the world. A quick search for the hero's journey says it is a universal story structure where a protagonist ventures out of their comfort zone, faces a major crisis, wins a victory, and returns home profoundly transformed. And in this, I do find a core human desire. In author Donald Miller's book, A Million Miles and 1,000 Years, he takes a script writing course, and is taught that a good story is about a character who wants something and overcomes conflict to get it. Very close alignment. We all seem to inherently desire deep, fulfilling experiences, and those by proxy tend to include an effort in order to achieve them, overcoming in essence. Making the effort and overcoming the challenge is part of what I think makes our experiences fulfilling, or what makes fulfilling experiences. So my expert on this topic in this show is Peter Bailey. Professionally, Peter has worked as a leadership strategist for 4 decades in more than 50 countries. But my interest is Peter's research and discoveries in developing your heroic journey mindset. He actually has a TED Talk by the same name. And recently, he's written a book, The Epic of You: Reframe Your Past to Navigate Your Future. So as you'll hear, at the heart of heroism is not what has happened to you, but how you have responded to life. Peter experienced a difficult childhood and an adulthood that's traveled through many of the primary trials of life and love to some acute degrees. And I wanted to dig in to how we understand and navigate our lives as we face crises and not let them dictate the outcomes of our lives. So coming up next, my conversation with Peter Bailey on deconstructing and navigating our hero journey. Peter, this topic of yours around the hero's journey, I interest myself a lot with, because I feel like I have, on one hand, I'm a fan of the hero's journey conceptually. On the other hand, I've had my own struggles conceptually, really just with the hero construct. So, you know what? First off, thanks. I'm eager to talk. I looked up this. I interest myself in how, when you type in a term these days, what you get back, just kind of the AI, compilation. And it said a hero is a person admired for their courage, outstanding achievements, or notable qualities, traditionally associated with mythological features and martial art epics. The term also broadly refers to ordinary individuals who perform extraordinary acts of bravery or sacrifice for others. So I have historically, I really like the term hero, and yet I also somewhat depict my own personal struggles as trying to be the hero, to the world. So I'm going to ask you, with all that said, how do you, Peter, in your own story here and what we're talking about, how do you depict the hero or think of it for yourself?
Great. Well, Kevin, great to be on this call with you. It's a complex issue. I think it does sort of connote somebody who climbed Everest or paddled a raging river. And there is that. And we have obviously all these cartoon heroes and superheroes, and we're usually, as clay-footed human beings, so far from that, we see a disconnect. And when I wrote The Epic of You, I wanted to bring the hero a little closer and say, where are we being heroic in our lives, and where can we give ourselves credit for that? And I'll give you one example. I was a single parent for a while. And while many people have had way, way worse life than I've had, or challenges or situations that happened to them, but it was helpful for someone said to me, it's not so much what happened to you, it's what it did to you. And so when you notice what those things did to you and how you had to adjust to get through them, That's the journey. And so the heroic journey works for me, and I'm happy to walk through it in a way to describe the stages and why they're important. But I'll just tell this one story that when I was a single parent, I had the two kids. They were young, both under 10, and after school night, giving them a Happy Meal from McDonald's and coloring books and keeping them engaged while we're in a pretty grubby public laundromat. All the clothes in, keeping them entertained. Now they go in the dryer, entertain them again. I take them out another 45 minutes later and the clothes are still wet because the dryer was broken. And so here I am, one of those unseen parents out there on a school night, winter Minnesota, wet clothes going back into a car, kids restless getting back into a car. And you get that struggle moment in your life that isn't Everest. It's an everyday struggle. And it just makes you grounded in realizing that was me at that moment being heroic. But think of the thousands of parents or workers who are in the hot sun holding the flag that says stop or slow. It may not be their favorite job, but they're putting food on the table. So I want to bring the heroic image closer to home, that where have we been heroic and where has the epic of them been missed? And where can they reframe the story to see that all those hard things you did actually gave you strength to move into your next challenge? So I like to play with it both ways.
Okay, thank you. You wrote in the concept of the heroic journey, I wrote down as opposed to the victim journey, in essence, or
right.
The reactive journey. And what you just said a minute ago, Peter, you said it's not what happened, but what you did. You and I, before we were talking here, mentioned one of the endorsements for your book is John O'Leary, who recent documentary film that you were involved with came out. And when I had John on on the show here the first time for his book, I think it was called On Fire, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. Had him on at some point, and I remember asking him this, and I feel kind of dumb in retrospect. It seems such an elementary question. Hopefully there was some really cool context. It didn't make it sound as basic as what it does to me now. But I ultimately said, if you could go back in time, of course, wouldn't you wish that had not happened to you, as he was, burned up in a fire at age, what was he, 9? Something like that?
Yeah.
And he said, no, I'd have it happen again. And Peter, I just couldn't quite reconcile that. I know he's redeemed so much and he's used his tragedy to bless so many people, and he credits it for his own life, but to go back and go, yeah, I would burn myself up to near death. I'd have that happen again. But now in my hopefully maturity or greater wisdom to look, and it's not what happened to him. He had a horrible tragedy that, somewhat maimed and disfigured him. And so much, I think he would cite trauma as a kid going through that, but what he did with it. And I really like to look at the term, and I'm going to throw this at you, of what we did with it, but that coming from the meaning we made from it. And I felt like I continued to read that thread. And that's a focal point of mine, is whatever happened to you matters, especially if it's traumatic, has bad consequences, or bad collateral damage in essence. But going forward, it seems like it's the meaning we make from it that is most helpful or detrimental. How does that set?
Yeah. And, we talked before this too about Eric Weihenmayer, who his blindness knew it was coming and finally happened at 13 years old. And that could have locked him in a room for the rest of his life. And his father and mother at the time said, no, let's go live a full life. And what can we do? Not what can't we do? And he also would say the same thing based on the fullness of his life. Climbed the highest peak on 7 continents, ran the amazing race, placed second, ran the rapids in a kayak on the Colorado River. Unbelievable, not for his own self-aggrandizement, but to show others that they can do it too. He built a beautiful nonprofit called No Barriers. and helping people realize what are the barriers we think we have. In fact, I do a lot of corporate leadership development at the Proudy Project. And one of the slides I like to show is a horse tied, just standing there tied to a plastic blue chair, tied. And I love it. And it says, sometimes, our limiting beliefs are all in our head. And truly, that's such a powerful image that horse could drag that blue plastic chair down the street, but not today because he's stuck by it. And so in our own minds, what are the things that we have happened to us, or we did or didn't do, that still hamper us because we think we're tied to them? And that's what the Epic of You really looks at. It looks at reframing your past to actually navigate your future going forward. So I love that about John O'Leary, and I love that about Eric Weimayer, these people who are amazing. We had Chris Lane, who you may have heard of. She was Miss Wheelchair Colorado, who was rock climbing as a mom in her 40s and fell 80 feet, spinal damage. And she just drove to the Proudy Project in Minnesota 2 weeks ago to speak to a group of people we assembled, because it's all about hope. It's all about connection. It's all about get up and get going. We got things to do almost no matter what happened, or in fact, because of what happened, whether it's family trauma or all the millions of things that can impact us, as you said. Not that people should not recognize that they are in fact victims to things, but how do we turn that around and use that to our advantage going forward?
Peter, am probably going to hit on some of the cultural perspectives that we tend to have around tragedy and what we do with it and whatnot. So one of them that I thought of as I was studying your book is that concept that I grew up with was an often quoted phraseology of everything happens for a purpose. I will admit, as I lob this at you, I don't know that I align with that term, but can everything, and again, I'm thinking about this as I'm reading through your book, can everything have a purpose? Yes. Can we derive value from everything no matter what, without having to look at it? Because there's been some things in my life that think, that happened for a purpose. No, I think, no, that happened because I was stupid,
right,
or I was insecure.
Right.
Not just to beat on myself, but I was immature. Did I do the best that I could? I don't know. I struggle with that term too, but I don't find help in, beating myself up. But is that track with a lot of your focus here is whatever happened, for whatever reason you decide to come up with, make meaning towards, can we derive some value and purpose out of it?
Yeah. And I think that's the play, is to, whether you believe, and I know you talked to David Cicillo about this, about whether we have free will or determinism and all of that. I don't know. I'm not a philosopher. I'm not a therapist. I just know in my own life, going back, looking, I'm 66 years old, at the things that happened to me that kind of routed me a different direction. Wendell Berry has a beautiful poem. It says, "Be like the fox and take more steps than necessary, some in the wrong directions." And I would say that was me growing up. I took a lot of steps in the wrong directions, trying to figure out, what does it mean to live a life? How do I live a life? Again, quick bio story here. Born into a family. My dad was a Navy pilot off of aircraft carriers, really cool, likable guy. Just came out of the Navy and happily married to my mom. And in the 6 months of their marriage, he gets an aneurysm and benched for life in a hospital. They took out brain tissue. Here was this incredible guy, happily married. And I was just born 3 months later into, what's happening here? There's a tension in the air. Something's wrong. And for whatever reason, not a purpose necessarily, I took it on like I did something wrong. It's like the dog thinks they did something wrong because you're fighting with your wife or something and they cower. I took that on, and I kind of went the other way and said, something's wrong. How can I fix it? How do I become the people pleaser to make my mom happy? And frankly, every relationship ever since then, what can I do to figure out the thing that makes this thing work. And was a loving family, but it was pretty dysfunctional, as you saw in the book. And she did the best she could in many ways and sent me to Africa when I was 18 and had an incredible journey, which got me into living and traveling in 50 countries, which, I'm forever grateful for that type of life enriching experience. But I sometimes equate it to kind of a long answer to your question. But if you took a plant and you put it in the closet, it would probably find a way to get that little light beam at the bottom of the closet to be the only light it got. And so it wasn't thriving, but it was mutating a way to survive. Yeah. And I look at the situations that happened to us being ways that we mutated, ways that we figured out survival under caustic, harsh, difficult living situations, and whatever that was, whether around the world or domestic here in the United States. And then unpacking that, like, that's what I did. I shoplifted, I drank, I drugged, I was the class clown. I, figured out how to be what I needed to be to manipulate every situation. And then later on in life, I think the work is unpacking that and saying, okay, those were defense mechanisms that don't work anymore, not needed. Deep breath. Can you start unraveling some of those defense mechanisms in a way to live a different life, a better life? And so that's some of the way that I look at the purpose was each of those did give me a gift. Yes. The heroic journey talks about getting a gift. In fact, when I wrote this in the book, I actually said, when I sorted the good and the bad in my life, I began to say, well, wait, some of those bad things, air quotes, gave me honey to my heart, made me more compassionate. Having a disabled dad as a kid growing up makes me way more compassionate to people who have issues in their families that they're struggling with. And other things that were difficult gave me what I call strength to my sword arm, made me more resilient, gave me more fortitude, gave me a chance to get up again and again and again when I fell down. And so why would I separate or negate those things that I would say are bad when they actually made me who I am today? And so that's a message. Everybody is a product of the experiences and the people they've met from everything that's happened already.
Okay, I'm stuck thinking about your analogy of the plant, behind the door and going after what light that it can be.
Yeah.
And I want to get literal with that I feel most of us as children have some aspects that felt like that. We didn't choose the environment. We didn't choose the circumstance. We didn't choose the upbringing in that way. And it was a door. It was shut. We had to do, like what you said, do what we could, do what we had to do. And good on us for figuring out something to survive. But fast forward and now to ask, is that door still there? Or is it wide open, but I'm still acting like it's shut? Or is it there, but I can reach up and open the stupid thing? Or can I take the door and build a house out of it? But anything other than just succumbing to that's just the way my life is. And again, that feels so elementary to say. Yep. And yet, man, if you look at the stats right now, we all know, it's there. Go to the CDC or wherever you want to go and look at the stats, and our reported well-being is at an equal or all-time low.
Yeah.
And there's really, I don't want to, again, negate anybody's circumstances, but culturally, at least,
right,
we can't find stats to back up why that is. There's nothing that circumstantially worse than ever before to equate to well-being ever before. So I don't know what's left other than for us to read your book. How's that for shameless promotion?
There you go. Well, my wife's a PhD in social work at the U of M, and she does work around well-being and animal-assisted interaction to support students coming together. And kind of like Brene Brown, who went after vulnerability in her research, what emerged was shame and had to unpack all the learning from that. My wife, Tanya, went after thinking how important natural world, animals, time and nature are for people. And what emerged was belonging. And so that research, I think, is underneath what's the scary stat also, is that the second highest form of death on college campuses nationwide is suicide. And so if belonging is the antidote to that, to our world of isolation, how do we build pockets, ways, connection points to belong? And so part of this book, the reason I wrote the book was that I grew up with the disease of comparison, where I could compare myself to you and find out how I don't rack myself up well, and you've got more of this and more of that, and I go off diminished. And that separates me. And we look around us on our scrolling phones at all the people and what meals they're on and what vacations they're on and what cruise ships they're on, which squirts the cortisol of negativity of I'm not enough, look what they have. Rather than how do we build a bonding and a connecting in these times that are really uncertain, really ambiguous, and I would agree, seemingly the worst they've ever been. How do we begin to go back towards almost getting closer to the ground and saying, where can we connect? Where can we help each other? Where can we bring back the barter system? You know, you cut wood, great, I'll get your firewood. I have honeybees, great, I'll bring you honey. Almost, not that we have to go back to the pioneer days, but they had something there that was different than what we're dealing with today. And so one of the antidotes to this, I think, is your communication. You have a fabulous podcast with amazing people and a wide listenership who have people who are sharing ideas and thinking and connecting. That's the start here, I think. We need more coffee shops and more bookstores and more running clubs and more service centers where we can connect and bring in things that we don't want to throw away, we want to share. I think we just got to, I'll stop rambling here, but find a way to come back to the center of humanity. What's important? Because I think we've lost that. I'll end with this thought. Peter Senge years ago wrote a great book called The Fifth Discipline. And in that he talked about, he says, you know, vision is an immune system for an organization. If you have vision when you're doing strategic planning, you can stay aligned with what you're going. And I think in our society, we have lost a sense of what our vision is in society. And that's why we're all scrambling around to try to figure out what that is for us individually. Whereas what we need to do is figure out what's our vision collectively. And that in itself is our collective heroic journey. How do we do that? You do yours, I do mine. How do we do it together?
I feel like in your book where you start off with speaking in vision is the vision we have first for ourselves and how you reoriented your vision. This quote I want to read. I think is at the beginning of one of the chapters at the beginning of the book. You said, or the quote says, life is not what one lived, but what one remembers and how one remembers it in order to recount it, by Gabriel Garcia Marquez, who I really like. And let me follow that with, you said, I think in that section, it was to the question to you, posed to you, maybe, you know, are you, Peter, are you ecstatically happy? Are you happy all the time? And you said, I set out to review every memory of my life that cast a negative shadow to assess and reel it in as a positive experience, which I gained something important that has made me a better person today. Okay, I'm taking that to look at memory and the vision that we have of ourselves. It's usually based upon how we perceived ourselves in the past. Right. And this concept of changing the narrative of that, I have always struggled with, Peter.
Yeah.
Because I get the concept, but when you have especially if you go back and look at a trauma that you had in the past as a kid or whatever, but in the past, and to go back and try to create a positive narrative, I perceive a lot of people feel like it's almost offensive. Like I felt what I felt. I can't change it. I can put different words around it, but at that point I felt what I felt. So play with this with me, because what I'm considering is, okay, you did. So we're not negating that at all. Yep. Can we possibly look and go, when that happened to you, I'm just going to make up something. When that happened to you at 12 years old, you perceived whatever happened with the mind of a 12-year-old, with the insecurities, the misperceptions, oh my gosh, we all know that things that we experience, when we go back and we thought, I thought my house was a mansion. It's just a small house, but what a different perspective that if we think about our memories that way, that we can now come and go, gosh, how can I've based myself on this perspective that I've had, but I'm a different person. I have a different, I'm 4 feet taller. Everything's different now. Can I reconsider those memories and what I am as a result of those? Tell me how that tracks.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And that, and it doesn't mean that my memories are accurate. It was the story I told. Yeah. And that story keeps me tied to that blue chair, you know? And so the question then becomes, as I'm now 4 feet taller and 66 years old, is that plastic blue chair I think I can't move from still serving me? Yeah. Is that still accurate? And I think that's the piece. Go back to Viktor Frankl, horrible, lost many of his family members in the concentration camps. And he says logotherapy derived from the ability to recognize my attitude as the only thing I have control over, not my circumstances. So not being Pollyanna, but can I in fact change my attitude about what I think I'm tied to? And can I in fact let go of that? Thank the blue chair for how it helped me get out of the closet of the plant, underwatered, under sunshine, and say, yes, that all happened, but now let's move forward. And what can you do with that? And where can you be a part of a solution that not only helps you, but actually helps other people? I started work in South Bronx High School and was doing outward bound programs with high school kids that had limiting beliefs of what they saw around them based on the structures of support. Lots of great family support, but they were facing some challenges that were going to be clearly evident for them as they were going through things. And as we did rock climbing and canoeing and camping, they got a chance to see themselves do something they didn't think they could do. And that's almost that new seed of self-esteem. Wow. And that's behind all of the Outward Bound and Noel's work. And a lot of the transformational leadership is that sense of, can I do something I didn't think I could do? Recovery programs on the 12 steps on anything you're trying to get away from an addiction. Self-esteem gets built one day at a time. How can I be better for not doing that thing 1 hour at a time, one day at a time? Because now I'm valuing another story, another way of doing this.
Tell me on this aspect of memory, Peter, this piece is a little bit new for me, as I have been studying, call it being present right now, right here, kind of like Ram Dass, be here now, right and here right now is all we have. Okay. I like that. I'm going to question it though, but I do like that. I mean, the past is gone. We know that the pithy term, yesterday's gone. The future doesn't exist. All I have is now. And really, I feel I've grown a lot in being here right now and appreciating right now. Right. But I'm going to butt it. But I also feel very, recognize the influence of I am perceiving now through memory. Yeah. I'm perceiving it through the past, everything that I'm looking at. So I'm trying to hold that and go, I can question that. Right. But if I woke up today brand new without any, amnesia, I don't know how to interpret anything. I don't know anything about anything. So I'm trying to honor the past, but not be confined by it. Thoughts? Well,
it's interesting, that confined word. I almost wanted to play with, if you did actually wake up right now in your life, you would actually say, wow, look at how much I have. Look at who I am. It's just this slog of a journey to get here that we think we're still not enough because we're comparing. I had a friend who had a great phrase. He said, we would envy our own lives. And that's a message I want to give to people in the Epic of You too, is when you see your life as a heroic journey, you begin to appreciate allies who helped you along the way in all 4 quadrants. The guardians of the gate that pushed you back, that actually helped save your life. that said no to something that wasn't the right thing for you at the right time. And yet you hated it at the time. But now in hindsight, you realize that was probably a good choice not to do that thing. And so I think we are restricted by some of the past we drag into it. I'm not a Buddhist, but I love the idea of equanimity of what if I didn't call it bad and good? What if I just said, these were the experiences of my life, and having malaria, having a wound cut out of my back, and, tropical ulcers, and going through dysentery. And I mean, just all of the things that happen. What if I just said, wow, cool, good for you, and the more I do that from those experiences, then I actually feel like I've lived a full life that some folks won't have experienced. There'll be things I've never done also, but, those things are for them what makes them richer, not in monetary value, but in experience. And I think that's part of it too, is that our lives are about the experiences we have and the people we meet and what we do about it. And so how can we take those two things and hold them differently? Like you said, not being a victim of those things, but to say, wow, those things happened and I am who I am today because of it. Hurrah.
Peter, that aspect, you ascribed it to a Buddhist philosophy of not calling something bad or good. In my past, I would have said, yeah, hoodoo guru, yeah, whatever. Some things are bad, some things are good, and they just are. And I just can't align with it anymore. I think of the Chinese farmer parable, and most people, if you don't know that and you're listening, go look up Chinese farmer parable. But these things happen to them, and everybody judges them bad or good, and they don't turn out to line up with that. And how often has something happened in our lives that we have judged bad or good that didn't turn out to be? We got fired from a job. We thought it was terrible. And later on we go, that was the best thing that ever happened to me. We won the lottery and thought best thing that happened to me, and it ruined us. And I just look at that now and go, if I have a car wreck today, as an active guy who I love running, I love riding my bike, and I'm in an accident today and I lose the use of my limbs, I would not desire that. I do not choose that. I won't be happy in the moment about that.
Right.
But is it going to be bad or good? I guess whatever I make out of it, maybe I'll end up like, our buddies that we talked about, Eric Weinmayer and John O'Leary, and I'll use it and I'll go on the motivational speaker tour and make $1 billion and think it was the greatest thing that happened to me. I don't know. And I am sensitive though, because I don't want to minimize trauma and tragedy and atrocity at all.
Right.
And yet there's just so many testimony that it's hard to make a judgment. Yeah.
Well, and all I have is what happened to me. And I know that I downward spiraled. And all I'm talking about in this book is how do I come out of that tailspin and sort of calibrate to fly straighter and say, wait a second, you're telling stories that, what is the great Mark Twain quote? The worst things in my life never happened, or something. It's like, and my sister would say, I don't remember it that way. And my mother probably before she died would say, that's not exactly how it happened. That's how it happened for me. So that's the story. That's the blue chair. And so this is just us figuring out, you could crash into the mountain on a tailspin if you had a bicycle accident, or you could say, okay, what am I going to do about this? That's my choice. And I think that's Viktor Frankl, and that's any of the spiritual disciplines that we can call on, is to say, damn, I'm sorry, that's really bad news. And what are you going to do about it? And so, I stopped drinking at 22 because it was bad enough. And I was only going to go down. That tailspin into the mountain was going to happen. And there are people who say, whoa, that's too bad. He's an alcoholic. You know what? I heard a great guy in a meeting in New York City say, if I hadn't become an alcoholic, I wouldn't have become much of anything, And actually, that's what got me back into flying straighter, because didn't have to deal with the leaves on the pool. I got to get rid of some of that. And so while I was able to begin that part of my journey of getting into sobriety and recovery, it has allowed me to let go of some of those blue chairs and be available to people in ways that I hadn't been before. I think that's the work. And it's going to look a little different for you, Kevin. It's going to look different for me or anybody listening. But the challenge I would offer to them is, where can you let go of the blue chair? Where can you take the plant out of the closet, give it love and light and water, and start saving the plants? You know?
Well, one of the primary aspects, or it was to me in reading your book, was the concept of ownership.
Yeah.
So I want to look at it from a couple different angles. One is perspective. And, you know, when we look at a trauma, I thought about this once. We had a big family home out in the national forest, and I'm gonna exaggerate to make a point here. I thought, what if it, because we had a couple of fire evacuations, and I thought, what if it burned down? Now for me, that would be horrible. But I was just thinking about my kids. I have a lot of kids. I could theoretically have one kid see it burning down and going, my life's over. This is the worst thing ever. The biggest tragedy. I'm never going to recover from this. Theoretically, and not really preposterous. I think you could have another kid going, oh, you know, I'm sad for my sibling stuff, but oh my gosh, I'm so grateful. I'm so sick of living out here in the woods. Can we move to a neighborhood? Totally viable. Nothing wrong with that. But so to start off with the ownership, owning that our perspective is our perspective, back to the bad or good and the things that we want to judge. Actually, the word I meant to use earlier with judge is predict. You know, we so often want to predict what's going to happen. And that's the Chinese farmer parable, where it was predicted what was good, what was bad, and nothing turned out as predicted. But owning that my perspective is my perspective, it makes sense. But I feel like, I think as well as a lot of other people, we struggle to do that.
Right.
Why do we struggle so much to own our perspective as just that?
Well, I guess it goes back to the comparison, you know, and, you know, this is June here and a lot of graduation parties for high schools and colleges. And going back to your kids under stress in colleges today, they've never been in a stranger place than graduating and looking for work right now. And I think the stressors are also in she's valedictorian, he was salutatorian, and boy, you didn't get a 4.0 like he did. You can't get into the next graduate school and that kind of thing. And it's continuing in your face. I'm not enough. But what if we completely flipped that narrative and said, Richard Leiter, who wrote my foreword, is an amazing author and educator around purpose. And he says, we are an experiment of one. What if we said to that graduating class, you are an experiment of one. There's 4,000 of you, unique individuals. So don't compare. Go be your best Kevin you could be. Go be the best Peter you could be. And if we grew people like that and sent them off, what changes would that be for their potential or opportunities that they see come their way? They don't have to be lawyer, banker, doctor, you know, AI specialist, that they could come up with what passions do you have? Joseph Campbell says, follow your bliss. And I think that becomes a hindsight thing later on when we realize, oh, I'm not living my bliss. Oh, how do I go back and follow my bliss? But what if you and I, coming out of high school, said, I'm going to follow my bliss? We probably would have had a different trajectory to our lives, and probably a little more freedom in the choices we made, because it wasn't about other people's sense of where we should go or what we should do. And I think that's part of the message too, is the epic of us, the epic of you, is giving people back permission. Thank God that COVID happened. As horrible as it was, that shifted people working more in their homes and remotely. And multiple companies formed with entrepreneurial spirit in a way that people realize, I don't want to do that anymore. I get to do it differently. And so we're building a life and a world around doing that differently. Sometimes it takes the wildfire in the woods to make the jack pine seed grow, you know? And so, we have to look at some of these tragedies. Not that I want to at all minimize that, but they do kick us into the next level. I sometimes think of it as an hourglass with choke points. We might be squirming through a choke point right now, but that's going to leave us into a much bigger chamber to look around and say, okay, now what? What's possible now? And I think that's the mindset of the heroic journey, not just the points on the wheel, but my wife's cancer journey. By her naming, the port tube and the peg tube power and purpose when she had throat cancer, gave her that oomph of ownership, like you said, to come through this differently than if she said, that's it, I'm done. I'm going to curl up in a ball. And most people I see on the other side of cancer journeys have such a powerful story of hope that they're telling the world about it. And it's because of their journey, not, in spite of it,
Yeah. I want to speak to a couple of things that you said and that you have said in the term of ownership again.
Yeah.
In looking at owning our role. So you just mentioned your wife with cancer, and I would bet that she has owning her role in how she's going to deal with it, her mindset, the choices she makes for treatment, whatever, she's going to own her role. Okay. You talk about divorce in your book quite a bit, that in there, I think pretty easy to have the concept of owning our individual roles in a relationship and whatnot, which we often don't do. We blame and accuse, but we could still, I think people can conceptualize that. But, and here's where I'm going to look at a place we tend to do that less. Because when we talk about tragedy, you looked as a kid, and when bad things happened in your dad having the aneurysm and whatnot, you took on some meaning that this had something to do with you, that it was your fault, which you would look back and go, it had been nothing about you.
Which wasn't correct. So that's why I say our histories aren't the truth necessarily.
but can I come to ownership that you're still looking back at that kid and taking ownership and going, yeah, it was me. I didn't know any better. I'm not blaming myself or at all. But it was you chose that perspective and that meaning, and you can take ownership and hold that, have compassion, but kind of deconstruct it as well.
Yeah, it does. It deconstructs is a good word. It's, like when you get a Caesar salad that's deconstructed, you start seeing all the parts again, and you think, yeah, that's actually what goes into the salad. That's actually what was there. I didn't realize when it was all mixed up. Yeah. And so sometimes, and I think this is a key factor, that we need to have reflection. We need to have the ability to use self-awareness, to step back enough and stop the chaos to say, is what I'm doing now working? Are the relationships I have now, loving? Are they going well? Is my job aligned with my soul and spirit? And do some evaluation of how I'm doing just right now in my journey. And if they're not, can I make some steps about those? Can I improve the relationship with my son or daughter? Can I improve the marriage I'm in now, or do I need to exit? I think that's part of it. And I think often in the whirl of our lives, we just hell-bent keep moving, and come what may, it becomes a bit of a crazy life of default. And I think what Epic of You is asking us to do is to pause and name those stages. What was the call to adventure to live in New York City? What was the call to move to Minnesota? Who are the allies? What was the guardian, the gate that pushed you back? What were those dark nights of the soul on that road of challenges that everyone faces? And then what was the accomplishment at the bottom of the circle of, I climbed the mountain, I ran the 5K, I stayed in a difficult part of the marriage, or I left it at the time that it was important to leave it? And then how do I come back from living? I don't talk in the book enough about 2 years I spent living and working in Indonesia. And I ran a corporate training center down there. And when I came back, nobody cared. I had a cook, a driver, a nanny, a gardener, and a guard. And I spoke the language fluently, and I was accepted in the community. And it was 20 years ago, and I still have WhatsApp messages from my my former staff and friends from Indonesia, because it was such a powerful piece. It probably is my next book, but but coming back from those experiences to Minnesota in winter, nobody cared who I was and what I did. And so there's that reentry from anybody in an expat experience of reentry, or coming back from divorce, or coming back from healthcare, or breast cancer, or any of those things. We're not a society that receives people back well. And so part of this is to have some reflection to say, can I plot my life in ways that I see it differently? And then can I live it going forward with that sense of a new map, a way of navigating differently? Can I now seek allies? Can I call you up and say, hey, look, I want to boot up a webcast or a podcast. Can you help me? Who are the allies to help me now? Because I can look in hindsight at who they were now that I name them, but I wasn't necessarily intentionally living a heroic journey life before, but I can going forward. And that'll make the journey better.
And you're making consistent references to the aspects of the hero's journey, which I went through and kind of mapped out as I read the book, and we'd be on here for 3 hours. So this is my shameless promotion of the book. Folks, go get the book, because you take us through that, and I really like it. I wish we would get into all of it, but I'm going to tease out another part that I just, with what you were saying, reminded myself of. You say in the book, as part of the hero's journey, Joseph Campbell speaks about in the journey, or the process of becoming something new. And in order for something new to happen, or you to become something new, or something new to be born, something has to die.
Yeah.
And you reference the me. And I consistently come to identity, how we perceive ourselves. And for me, I realized my identity was so built on attachments.
Yeah.
Things that were there, like, marriage, like the big family and family home, like my own athleticism and fitness and whatever. And at times when those things ceased being able, when I had a big wreck and I couldn't move, when I got divorced, when we lost the family home, when those went away, then who's me? What was left? So things died that I didn't want to, which is usually the case. And now I'm looking at going, gosh, if I want something to be new, maybe I need to let something die proactively and not wait for it to happen as well. But speak to that, because I think that's, again, we're not good at letting go. We're not good at detaching. We hold on and I think stay stuck. And I say we, including me in there, historically.
Yeah, well, and I'll just call out another author. Arthur Brooks wrote From Strength to Strength, and many of your readers and listeners have heard that. And it's got a couple of really powerful pieces in it, where you see this arc of your fluids intelligences, where, you're a sales guy, you're fast and furious and doing great things, and you're kind of clicking on all cylinders, and you're feeling good, and you're all in yourself about how good and successful you are. And that tapers off at about 40, 45 years old. And what we end up trying to grip onto is, can I still keep that me that I was, that image that I was, longer into my later years, when actually he says, no, we're not as good as we were at that thing. We need to shift and pivot into what he calls crystallized intelligence, which is a way of looking at those skill sets differently. Rather than being the hard driving sales guy, can I be a mentor of other people? Can I shift into this sense of what it's like to be an elder in my community? Can I find value in another image? I do a lot of work executive coaching with people who are in transition, and there's a lot of us, the baby boomers right now, 70 million people are going to exit by 2030 into what I call the employment parking lot, where they're going to still be healthy, still ride bikes, still want to golf, still be, physically fit, but they don't have the title of CEO, CFO, CMO anymore. And so who are they, like you said? And I think this is the right time for us to really do this work and say, I am not my job. I am not my house or my car or the image that I have painted myself into. I am a lot more than that. And now let's define what that can do going forward. And that's a heroic journey I want to set everybody on. But now they've got the tools. They've got a leadership backpack of great. I'm going to get some allies. I'm going to prepare for what are the things I need to do physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually to be fit for whatever's coming down the road. And I'm going to bump into some guardians from the gate and I'm ready. When I did my TED talk, I called them sort of like these sumo wrestlers with an, Al Pacino voice. Where do you think you're going? And they push you back. But if I'm ready for them, little jujitsu and I'm by, And so how can I use this to my advantage, not plotting my life only in the back? That was the exercise to learn it. Now the journey is going forward. How do I age when eyesight's going, hearing's going? My knee is a 3-mile knee. I can only get, and my voices in my head say, stop running, Yeah. And I think that's the journey for everybody, is to how do we use this heroically in a good sense to say, I'm going to need some help to be a hero here. And I need to call my assets, all my allies in to help me go through this. A lot of talk there, but
I mean, ultimately, Peter, I feel like you're calling us into this a deeper experience, a deeper existence, and a deeper experience. Even you talking about this culture that's aging, I am seeing that more and more. And I tend to commune with guys more, and to see guys who have gotten to a level of financial security and where they kind of retire. They got enough money built up and they got, it's going to produce for them. They don't have to. The kids are gone. They're not needed on a daily basis. And that the term of, and a guest recently brought this to me, of obligations that we end up living so long fulfilling these obligations. And when the obligations are all of a sudden gone, we don't know what to do. That was our purpose, was the obligations. God bless you for putting a roof over your head and clothing people and investing in kids and family and whatnot. But as those, and I'm at a similar place with those things gone, is what's left after the obligations. And man, if there's nothing beyond that, we're in trouble. And we're seeing that. I think that's what you're speaking to.
Right. So, I did a little bit of sketch work. I do a lot of journaling. And I want to share with you, when I did that fluid intelligence to crystallized intelligence, I had sort of a from to chart. See how this plays for you, that I want to move from a doing person to a being person.
Amen. Yeah.
And then I want to move from a striving to taking a deep breath and arriving. And I want to move from the I wants to, wow, I have. And I want to move from being a waiter of service to others, or what do you need? How can I help? To, I want to be a buffet of offerings. Come on in. I don't know. What looks interesting? Come take it. That kind of thing. And I want to move, you said the word, obligations to serve, to an invitation to share. And then I wanted to, and I'm still playing with the words here, so you and your listeners can help me. But this idea of moving from knowing something to curiosity and continuing to grow. I think a lot of us put a lot into being the smartest person in the room, and that is slowly dying. Let's be more curious. Let's ask the why and the how could we's, rather than no, that can't be done. And I think the future of our world is going to require a lot more nimbleness. I talk about that in the TED Talk, having loose knees, a lot more perspectives on another way of doing this, because the way we're doing it sure ain't working, And so how can we build in that fluidity? That's the only thing I don't like about the Arthur Brooks piece, is that the crystallized sounds brittle. and I would like almost that to be more fluid, So how could I see that is that crystallized is maybe that, and I use this analogy a lot, is every chip on our diamond lets in more light. So maybe that's the crystal of the future, is that where can we bring in more light? Where can I shine more light based on everything that's happened to me? I do a lot in the recovery world. I'm going to be 45 years sober unless I do something stupid in August, and it's like, well, do something with that. Share it, So I just joined the board of the oldest sober high school in Minnesota, because I don't know if they don't know who I am. They don't really care, but maybe there's something I can bring and share that, I do think there's a life of purpose here somewhere, but it's not about going and doing this serving at a soup kitchen necessarily, unless that really speaks to you. I'm more interested in where we actually did a service project where we said, where can they help us see what we're missing? And Janet Hagberg was part of a community that we worked with, and she said, I want them to not receive your service as corporate executives. I want you to listen to their story and see where you're missing what they have. And so the people who were unhoused at the time, their heroism, their service mindset, their community, we were all like dumbfounded by how much we didn't have that in our lives, and they could show us that. So I think there's a lot more give and take. It's not from people on high giving to others. It's we are all trying to figure this out before we blow the planet up. So the quicker we get there, the better.
Hey, you're going from doing to being, Peter. That's been a guiding point of my life for the past 2 or 3 years. So I had Arthur Brooks on the show twice. Oh, cool. Actually.
I haven't heard that one. I'll have to go back. That's great.
His book, I don't know when it came out, 2023, 2024, Strength to Strength. When they sent the galley copy to me, I remember where I was sitting and I'm reading it and him talking about our efforts. And as we get older and we're doing the same things and it's tiring us out, and the fear that can come around that. Peter, I sat there at first thinking, I'm just depressing myself with this book. That's me, son of a gun.
Right.
Thank goodness he redeems it. And I'm also with you. His analogy of fluid knowledge to crystallize. I try to think of the crystallized because I don't like that looking like a fragile or a fixed thing, but to look at it as hopefully at this point, I've got some wisdom and some experience that I can now impart and work from and utilize. And because, and as you said, I like the quote. I think it's often attributed to Einstein. I don't know who really said it, but the more I learn, the less I know. And you talked about wanting to be curious. And I even to the point of feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm so tired of trying to hold on to certainty that doesn't exist. Right. If I can just take a breath and be okay with some of the mysteries and some of the curiosities, I'm good. I can't be threatened.
Right. Yeah. Well, the Einstein quote I love too is, we can't solve a problem with the same consciousness that created the problem, which means we've got to all take a level up and say, what's another way? Because we've been doing this way politically, environmentally, dominion over animals and water and land, the way we interpreted it. And that's got to change if we want to have something move forward in a better way. And I think that's where we need to change our perspective, bring in more cultures with different attitudes of how they are stewards of the land and water and community networks that seem to be working better than ours. We've never been so partisan. And so how do we come back to love? How do we come back to caring for people? And I think that's the work what we have to do going forward. And that's our heroic journey. I don't know how to do it. I'm going to need some help. How do I call upon good people to help do this together?
Peter, I just got back from an event. I don't do a lot of speaking, but I was fortunate enough to be at a big event in LA, and for an organization, 80 nationalities were there. 80 nationalities. I was not a majority. I don't know if I was the minority, but everything, different languages, everything was being translated. And my experience, and I'm going to give some credit to this organization, is having I really like their ethos, and I think their spirit kind of exuded through. But just looking at the differences of color, language, size, shape, I mean, everything, I felt more just joyful people, joyful, peaceful people. And I thought, how great, because it just kind of leveled the playing field, And I don't experience that in my normal little bubble of, whiteness up in the mountain. And what a gift. It's like I need a dose of that every week.
Yeah, no, I love that. And maybe offline you could tell me who the group was. I'd love to hear, because I was in Lisbon recently and my wife and I just did a little trip, and I love sitting in the square, just watching hundreds of people playing together, talking together, the languages, kids chasing the bubble maker with the string and the bubbles floating across the piazza. And I thought, we've lost that. You know, most European cities had the water fountain in the center, and all alleys and roads led into that. And that's where the farmer's market was. Christopher Alexander's book, you know, I have it right here, The Timeless Way of Building. He talks about dying cities. We've built cities that don't have city centers anymore. We don't use them the way we used to. So I think we got to go back to some of that. All you're talking about is really powerful, that we have to look at how do we reconnect here.
Well, I'm going to anchor us here on you've mentioned this multiple times, just being self-aware. And you have a statement. I don't know if I have the final copy or a galley copy, but
you got the final. I think it looks like a hardcover.
Page 89. Then,
yeah,
it says, "I wanted to." I wanted to take ownership of my life and not live by default. That
right.
word default. I've been using the word set point. That we have defaults, we have set points, and to some degree, that's great if we're in an uncertain moment, you know, to have some things about ourselves that we can rely on. But I continue to question and want to better discern my defaults. I don't know what I don't know. And I just realize I get so blinded with Kevin and what I've understood to this point. And thank goodness for new experiences that open me up to different things. But I choose to believe I live so much in default, and I'm trying to use the word curious and be aware, because I don't perceive myself as suffering, but what am I not experiencing? What am I stuck in? What am I not able to impart because of my own blindness? So again, that line you said, I wanted to take ownership of my life and not live by default. I just inspire myself with your journey and your intent to be curious, to be an adventurer, to have new experiences that open you up to something different. You describe yourself as a student, a learner, a watcher, and I don't perceive that as a norm, and that's why we're talking.
Well, you got to give yourself a little more credit. How many podcasts have you done already? Hundreds?
1,700 plus.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
Well, so you are a learner. You are curious. You do get out of yourself to ask great questions of other people. You shine the light on other people. You're one of the gems. I mean, that's what you and that's what you got to do, is stop the BS of, oh no, I'm not. You got to start owning that and say, this is one of the ways I'm serving. And in your crystallized wisdom, you are a networker. You're pulling people in. You said you're reading stuff, and you've got an amazing array of people in here. I'm going to invite you to call a friend of mine too. Tanya Jackman Hampton wrote the book, The Fearless Leader, The Myth of the Fearless Leader. Talks about growing up as an African-American woman who also climbed high in corporate structures, but also had early gray hair. And so she talks about some of those elements, but also this idea of we're not necessarily supposed to be fearless as we do this. We might be in fear as I go on this next heroic journey. And so we throw a lot of things in the way. Don't be fearful, be a hero. Don't be, and that's a mythology too. We may have to let go. That could be a blue chair. Asking for help is a blue chair. Doing it alone is a blue chair. I did a keynote recently, and people came up to me, and they're in job transition, and they're networking with each other, not in a needy sense, but in a, what can I learn about what you're doing that's helpful to me? And they're passing that on to other people. So I think there's so much we can do right now. This is a really ripe time for connection. We're hardwired, my wife says, for connection, and the biology of connection is so important. We've got to find a way to do that more. And thank you for you and pulling your podcast and the good people together and getting it out there so that people can reach out they can contact me, they can contact you, they can contact your other speakers, because this is important work right now, and it can't be done alone. I think we need to help each other. So I'd say do more speaking, because I think you're great at this, and I think we need more people knowing about the way that we can be of service.
Well, you've been of service to me today. Thank you. Peter, thanks for sharing your journey, for the vulnerability. And yeah, again, we could have talked, we could do another show just on your story and another one on the constructs of the hero's journey, but that's what you have a book for. So I will continue telling people I'm honored to share that with everyone, but I'll admit thanks for letting me journey alongside you today. I'm grateful.
Well, you got another friend for life here. So thanks for reaching out and doing great work. Really enjoyed it, Kevin. Thanks.
Thank you, Peter.
Thanks for joining us in the discussion. That again is Peter Bailey. And the book I was referencing is called The Epic of You: Reframe Your Past to Navigate Your Future. And again, he has a TED Talk that you can look up titled Developing Your Heroic Journey Mindset. Till next time, here's to you and me making better meaning in our lives and experiencing the miracle of living.
Yeah.